Hello. So for those of you that came here for the clinic, I guess we'll call it, let's get going. So my name's Brian Nutter. I'm also referred to as the Nutter Professor. I used to teach guitar design, repair, and construction for Musicians Institute. I am now the Director of Manufacturing for Mighty Mite. So we'll be doing US-made Mighty Mite parts very, very soon. Bodies, necks, pick guards, pickups. We're also continuing the G&L pickup line. So for those of you that are into G&L pickups, I got you. So we're going to be, yeah, exactly. We're going to be talking about the neck and how to take care of the thing, how to, we're going to demystify some things, but maybe even demythify, if you will, a few bits, because there's a lot that goes around with guitars. I mean, the internet has brought us a lot of great stuff, but the internet has also really, really screwed up the guitar business. Because now we've got all these armchair guys that believe in things like, I don't know, fairy dust and unicorn pee and all this kind of stuff, right? That's not the case. So with the guitar neck, the first thing I want to talk about is, and it's the first thing we do when we do a setup. If you were here for any of the setup stuff I did, the very first adjustment that we make on the guitar is going to be the truss rod. A lot of folks, whenever they think about the truss rod, that really wigs them out, right? Because they're like, man, I don't want to adjust my own truss rod. I heard a dude once say, I don't want to adjust my own truss rod because I'm afraid I'll never get my guitar in tune again. What? Dude, first of all, that used to be a tree, and all we're doing is just sticking a piece of metal in there. Relax, it's okay. So the truss rod. There are two different types that I'll tell you about. There's what we call the single action or more traditional type truss rod, which is really just a piece of 3/16 steel rod that's got an anchor at one end and it's threaded on the other. This is mounted in a curved channel. Looks like this. Side view of a neck. So there's the truss rod. So that's why whenever you look on on a fender and you see that skunk stripe, that's a filler strip. That's not there for decoration. On some modern ones now it is, but originally it wasn't. It was a filler strip. So the reason it's mounted in there in a curve, and we call it single action, is that if the neck has a big bow in it, like this, when you tighten that rod's going to try to straighten out. As it does that, it pulls the neck straight up again. Now, if it's got a back bow, it can't do anything for that. You can loosen it all the way up, but it's not going to move the neck forward and give you the up bow that you need. There are advantages to this. It's cheap. It will displace less wood. It's lightweight. So, and now I know it's the question, what's it weigh, is ahead of, how does it play or how does it sound? What's it weigh? It's do some push-ups, dude, come on. Now, the other truss rod is the dual action truss rod. I love this one because, let me grab a wrench and some pliers. Now this one, it just mounts in a flat bottom channel in the neck, like that, which is way handier than having to, if you're doing this by hand, that's tricky because that's a little bit of a complex router setup to make that happen. If you're doing it with a CNC, there's just additional programming you have to worry about. This is route a slot, no biggie. So if I have my 4mm rod here, and I hang on to this, and I try to tighten it up, what you're going to see, as I do, it bends upward. And I go the other direction. So if I have back bow, it pushes the other way. Here's how it works. You can't see it because of this covering. What you've got is, at the very end, there's a block that's an anchor. On the top, there's a flat rod that's connected to a little block here. Out here is our adjustment nut. Here, we have the rod portion and our threads. So as you tighten, that nut's tightening on the rod. So as it pulls in, it lifts up in the middle, and you go the other way as you're trying to loosen, if you will. It's going to hold here and push down to correct up and back bow. So most modern guitars now will have this. I have arguments with John Suhr about this. John's like, if you know how to make a neck, you don't need a double action truss rod. I'm like, if I can adjust it both ways, why wouldn't I? That's ridiculous. Now, you can mess up both, and people have, like that company. But we won't get into that. So the whole adjustment of the truss rod, just like I talked about in the last clinic, when you adjust the truss rod, what I do, let me grab this guy. I'll end up putting a capo here on the first fret, and then I will fret the 12th fret, and then I'll use a feeler gauge to measure somewhere in between there and here. Because what I've done is I've turned my low E string into a straight edge. What I'm looking for usually is some kind of clearance between the top of the fret and the bottom of the string. Fender's spec is 10 thou, so that's like the thickness of your high E string. Jackson used to be 4 to 6 thou. Novo for sure is 3, so it's very, very straight. But there still is a curve in there. Why do you need the curve? You need the curve because the string itself, when you hit it, it swings in an elliptical motion, like this. Like a jump rope. So as the string is swinging around like that, if your neck's perfectly straight, well, it's going to bang into the frets and buzz. So if you got a little bit of that curvature in there, then you got clearance for the string to swing. The amount that you put in there, that's up to you. That's like that clearance that I was talking about. That depends on how you play. Do you play hard and like punk rock style? If you do that, you don't want a real straight neck because you're going to buzz a lot. You're going to want clearance for that huge swing of the string. If you're into like, I don't know, like prog metal, you'll probably want a real straight neck because your touch is going to be super light. You're not going to have that massive swing in the string. Like country, chicken picking stuff. That varies. You know, I've seen guys play with huge high action or really, really light strings in super straight neck and low action. So up to your playing style. Now, it's not something to be wigged out over. Again, it's just some metal inside of a stick. It's not going to hurt anything. Adjustment-wise, you'll see a 4mm Allen, which is real common. Fender used a 1/8 for a while. You'll see the Gibson has a 1/4 inch nut that's actually up here. But Fender also had adjustment down here, which meant that we had to take the neck off. That's another big one. If you have to take the neck off, and it's okay, nothing's gonna, you're not gonna break anything. So if we have to take the neck off, take all of your screws out, set everything off to the side, loosen your strings, and I'll typically put a capo at like the 7th or 9th fret. That way when I pull the neck, all my strings are held on. When you take the neck out, this is a big one. Some neck joins are very, very tight, and you can end up pulling paint off of the guitar. I will tend to, and some guitars actually have guide pins that are set in the body, between the neck and the body, to keep it from like moving around. So whenever I take all of the screws out, I'll usually rock back, like backwards just a little first, and then gently ease the neck out. Don't just take the strings out and grab a hold of the neck and try to pull it off. God only knows what you're going to tear up when you do that. Make an adjustment, and usually a truss rod is not going to take more than maybe a 1/4 of a turn in either direction. It's a drag when you're doing that heel adjust in a Fender, because you do have to take the neck off and on so much, but it's not so bad. It's a drag if it's a floating Floyd. That's a whole other thing. When you go to put the neck back on, because you've already put a screw into the neck, and you're really just, on a Fender style guitar, you're using, that's not wood screws, it's a sheet metal screw. So you've threaded the inside of that maple with the screw. You don't want to just jam the screw in there and start screwing in, because you could cross thread and you could destroy the thread that's already in the wood. The screw will just chew all that stuff up. So when you do, set the screw in through the body and so that it's touching the neck, and you'll feel it stop. Then gently turn the screw backward. As you do that, you'll hear a click. That click will be the thread sitting down into the thread of the neck, letting you know that you can then tighten the thing up and it'll follow the thread that's inside the neck. Otherwise, you're going to run the risk of stripping the hole inside the neck, then it'll need to be filled and re-drilled, and that's a drag. Don't do that. Any questions thus far? Are we good? Now, what happens if you want to put a new neck on? Well, we got plenty of those. So if you get a Mighty Mite neck, right now, Mighty Mite necks don't have any mounting screws, holes, in the back of the neck. Like this. What do? How do you get the neck on and make sure that everything's lined up and you didn't screw something up? First, make sure that you purchased the right scale length neck for your body. I couldn't put this on a Strat because that's a square heel and a Strat has a 5-inch radius on the bottom. I can do a Strat neck and a Tele. It just looks goofy right here, and you can just hopefully cover it up with a pick guard. But with this Tele neck and a Tele pocket, so I'll set the neck in, and as you've seen what I've done here, I've just put my 2 E strings on. That's it. Because I'm going to use those as my lineup tool. So I'll use a clamp to put the neck in and hold it there while I put my E strings on. You're going to want to make sure that you're going to want to make sure that the clamp isn't in the way of the string path, because the strings have to be free and clear. So what we're doing is we want the way the guitar lines up is based on a center line. So if you can imagine, right here, dead in the middle of the body, all the way up through the top of the headstock, one line that is dead in the middle. Everything's based on that center line. Center line is key to making this work. So here I've got my strings on. So can you see here, big gap here, and my high E string's falling off, right? No bueno. That is not what I want. I want the E strings to both have about the same amount of room on either side. So, there. That's looking good. So now I know that's lined up. I can now use the body as a drill guide to be able to drill my first hole. Typically, I use a 9/64 drill bit, and I'll put a piece of tape on my drill bit to make sure I'm not going to drill all the way through. I've seen that. So you put a piece of tape on just to make sure that your drill bit's not going to, you know where to stop. I'll drill one hole. From there, I can put the plate on and I can put a screw in. Now I can take the clamp off. I just need one in there to hold the thing in place, because right now I wouldn't be able to drill all of them because this thing's in the way. So once I get that off, then I can drill the other 4 and I can put the neck on. It's not tough. So if you're thinking of, like, if you have a Strat or you have a jazz bass or something and you're not digging the neck, or you want a rosewood fretboard instead of a maple fretboard, or you want a neck that's got bigger frets instead of the one that you have in there now, it's easy to swap out. That's what the whole thing about Mighty Might is like mod your heart out. So mod your guitar. There's a few other things to talk about with the neck. Neck that has a rosewood or an ebony fretboard. That wood has nothing on it. There's no finish on it. So over time, it will dry out and it will need to be conditioned. This can be done with a variety of things, like lemon oil. There's tons of different fretboard conditioners. I have used 3-in-1 oil forever on rosewood and ebony fretboards. It's just something to get in there and to provide a little bit of moisture content, and it also helps clean out, and because you're leaving, you know, dirt and sweat and goo and DNA and, you know, half a beer from the last gig or something like that inside that fretboard. It helps to clean all that stuff out. It will also help to prevent the fretboard becoming too dry and cracking. If you have an ebony fretboard, particularly in the wintertime, it's a good chance you could see some fine hairline cracks in the fretboard. That sucks. If it's ebony, it's actually really easy to fix. That's another time that I'll tell you how to do that. But if it's maple, maple is a little different, because maple sometimes will have like a really glossy finish on it. And sometimes it'll be sort of like this. It might have an oil finish. If it's a 70s style Fender, it's going to have a lot of polyurethane on it. If it's a 50s or 60s style Fender, it's going to have nitrocellulose lacquer on it. If it's a 1984 style Charvel, it's going to have Danish oil on it. So the ones that have like the nitro or the urethane, those are protected. So all you got to do is just clean those. Just don't make them gross. Because now, if the finish is worn off, like this guy has, like we have sort of mimicked, you know, the aging process. Now that one's exposed. It has some oil in there, but that's another thing you'll want to do. Make sure it's clean, and there are different like buffing compounds and other sort of like conditioners that you can use for this as well to prevent that drying out or taking on too much moisture. Any of you guys touring or doing like pro gigs or anything like that, or playing regularly? Nobody? We're in Nashville. Come on, I thought everybody had a gig today. So, yeah, right? So if you're doing a bunch of gigs and you're doing gigs all over the place, you'll run into climate change. Climate change is a big one for a neck. You'll, particularly something like this, that's not coated in polyurethane or lacquer. So it'll take on moisture in superhuman climate, and it will be relieved of all that moisture in a dry climate. And you can go in a day, go from one to the other, and have kind of a problem on your hands. So there will be times where you will have to adjust your truss rod. You'll be looking for cracks. You will have to carry around some fretboard conditioner, some 3-in-1 oil or something like that you'll be able to do fretboard conditioning on the fly. The other thing with like losing moisture is you'll end up with what's called fret sprout. Fret sprout is where you feel the sharp edges of the fret wire on your hand, in dry climate. Does that mean that the fret grew? No, it's metal. Nothing happened. It stayed right there. The wood shrank. So how do you fix that? This is one of the easiest things to have to deal with. It's something that you will pay, you'll pay a luthier a lot to fix this, because they like to like to make people believe that it's a dark magic or something, like Hogwarts style stuff. It's not. They're going to grab something that looks like this, pull the neck off, and physically file the fret. Let me pop this neck off. So you know that the neck has the fret ends are usually beveled over. Depending upon the manufacturer, they can come way over or not. You're going to want to hit the bevel as well as the 90-degree that's sort of perpendicular to the fret side. So you'll run this way and then this way. As you do that, let me give you a little cross section here of kind of what this should look like. So if I have my fretboard here, here's my neck, and then here is my fret. So I've got that, and then here's my tang, and everything's sticking out because the fretboard shrank. When you file, that perpendicular version is going to hit this. It's going to take that tang, or the little T spot in the fret that's down in the fretboard, that's going to take that back flush with the edge. Then you still have this to contend with. The bevel cut is going to take that in just a hair. So when you run the bevel cut, you're going to want to have the slightest little bevel right here on the edge of your fretboard. You'll be able to see it. It'll be like a little fine line. Now, one like this that has been aged is going to have a really heavily rounded over fretboard edge, so you're not going to see that as much. But on a new guitar that hasn't been relicked or aged or beat up or whatever, then you will end up seeing that little fine bevel on the edge. That tells you that you've taken the fret over enough and probably bought yourself a good bit of real estate in case it gets too dry and shrinks down again. Hopefully, you won't have to deal with the whole fret sprout end. Now, once you've filed them, though, now you've got problems. You have some marks, and you'll see those on the side of the fret. So if I look at this like a cross-section of the fret from the side, so here's the crown of my fret, and here's the tang. You'll probably see like diagonal marks in the ends of the frets. That's just tooling marks from the file, or chatter, because the kind of file you'll use will be a bastard mill file like this that's attached to this little block from StewMac. So those diagonal marks, they're easy to get out. I mean, what I'll tend to do is on that same block, I will stick some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'll do the same thing to take away those marks. I'll switch to 220 and then 320. After 320, now all my tooling marks are gone. But I've sharpened, if you will, that ridge. So now I've got a really, really clean, precise line here that will still feel sharp and could cut if you've done it really well. So we got to get rid of that. So I'm going to use a thing called a crowning file, or even a little needle file. The crowning file is cool. This is a diamond crowning file. You can see here there's just like a little rounded groove cut out in here, right? It's on both sides. Now I use this for crowning the tops of the frets after I've done a fret level, from putting in new frets or doing a fret dress. But I also use this for rounding fret wire, or for the fret end. As I go over the end of the fret, here, and it just takes a couple of swipes. If it's a nickel fret wire, that's it. If it's stainless, maybe 4 or 5. Don't put stainless steel fret wire in. Nope. They're awesome to play. They're a huge pain in the ass to work with. So what you end up doing, I'll get another color here. As I take that crowning file over, I'll end up rounding that section. So now my good sharp line isn't there anymore. Now it's feeling better, but I still might feel this on the sides. For that, a little needle file. One of my favorites is the 1175 from StewMac. It's flat on the bottom on one side and it's round on the other. And this is a great file for this, or a triangular file, which is what this one is, that has the points ground down so that you don't dig into the fretboard as you're doing this. So with that, I'm going to aim for that point. And I just want to just round that over ever so slightly. And you can also come up just a hair to grab that. So now your fret wire on the ends is all nice and round, but now you still have to do some sanding and some polishing. So I'll take some sanding sponges starting at 320, and I'll go up to about 800, just raking over the edges. That will promote the rounding on the end of the fret wire. It will also give you a little bit more of a round over here on the side of the fretboard. And then from there, you can either use a little bit of polishing compound or use a buffing wheel and clean all of that up, and then you're good to go. So all of these kind of things sound super daunting to guitar players because they're so worried. Oh my gosh, I'm going to mess something up. How bad can it be? My email, by the way, is brian.nutter@mightymite.com. Brian with an I, Nutter just like the cookie, but not nearly as sweet, and Mighty Mite as you would expect. So if you want to do this kind of stuff to your own guitar, and you feel like, oh my gosh, I've just backed myself into a corner, email me. I'll help you. It's not that big of a deal. I will completely talk you through. I might even send you videos on how to do it. I've done that before. I have fully I have a little tripod that I usually have at my workbench that I have set up and go, okay, here's what we do. Grab a hold of this. Do that right there. Don't go too deep. It's not as daunting as you think it might be. One other little thing, since we're talking about frets. So you've just set your guitar up, and it's back to all the specs that you know, that you love, but now there's a buzz on the 3rd string at the 14th fret. Why? Well, depending upon what time of year it is, again, how much moisture has it taken in, how much has it given up? Well, if it's buzzing at the 14th fret, chances are 15 is a little high, or is lifted some. What do? There's a handful of ways to deal with that. One way is to use that, which is just a little fretting hammer. Again, this is a little Stu-Mac tool. One side is nylon, the other side is brass. I will gently give it a little love tap to seat the fret back in. I'll check using a feeler gauge, a very highly specialized luthiery tool that you can buy at O'Reilly. And I'll use the 3/1000 feeler gauge. And if I can slide that thing in there and the end of it slides underneath the fret, then I know that the fret's not seated. If I tap it a couple of times to seat it, check. And if it doesn't go underneath, then your buzz should go away. You could also use a little bit of paste wax to either side of the fret and wick in some very thin super glue and then clamp that down and hit it with some accelerator, and that should also pull it down and seat it, that you'll be able to check to make sure that the feeler gauge doesn't sit underneath it. So don't always immediately think you have to file something. But on occasion, you might have to, because the fret didn't come loose, but the fretboard itself, or the neck, has lifted. A bolt-on neck will tend to develop a ski jump, if you will, because this part of the neck doesn't move. So then we'll go back to this to do a little bit of a fret level. That we will save for another time. Keep the fretboard clean. So many guitars get brought to me, and it's like, hey, can you work on this? And they'll set it down, and it's like, man, not without 2 sets of nitro gloves and a Tyvek suit and a fresh air helmet am I coming near this guitar, because it's disgusting. But it looks cool. It doesn't look cool. It looks gross. It looks nasty. Don't do that. It's so. There was a friend of mine here in town. He's a big songwriter. His name's Bruce Wallace. He also plays guitar for the Little River Band, and he has a 1981 G&L F100. He brought it to me. He hadn't played it for a while. At this point, I guess it was a long while. He brought it to me as a maple fretboard. The frets were green because they had oxidized so much. The fretboard had it was maple, but it looked like it could have been rosewood because it had so much just grime and DNA, and it took me 2 hours of just scraping and cleaning and letting stuff sit and soak for a while before I finally got it all off. I remember giving it back to him. It was never again am I doing that. But yeah, make sure the guitar is clean. That's a huge thing. So, what questions you got for me?
I want to clarify that file tool. Is that just basically a holding block with the file parallel?
This? So yeah, no, this is...
Somewhere it's a 45 grain.
So, you're thinking of a beveled, a beveling file. Okay. So yeah, that is it's usually a Teflon block that has that same style of file mounted into an angled cut. And those are, then you can just ride the Teflon block on top of the frets and the file because it's mounted that way. will cut your bevel in there. Those are totally fine. You can make those, I've seen guys make those out of just regular wood blocks, on their table saw. They'll crank their table saw blade over and run it to cut the slot. And then truly all that's held on with is epoxy. I've always just loved this. I made mine, it looks just like this, but it's old. I made mine probably, 30, 34 years ago, something like that. And I still love to bevel frets this way. I can control the angle a little bit better this way. You don't have to have the handle. It could be just a mill, like a Nicholson mill file that you get at Lowe's, and do it that way. But remember, all those have like a little point on the end for mounting them in a handle. When you do that, make sure that when you're coming, if you're going this way, make sure that that point is back here because it's easy to bang into the headstock. Ask me how I know. When I was teaching at the school, I tell everyone that every week there was some way someone would bring me something and I would go, huh, I didn't know you could do that. Cool. What else?
When you're cleaning off the fretboard, cleaning off like the gunk or the slime,
Uh-huh.
so what would you recommend using, like a razor blade or a
Depends.
spool or something?
I don't like to use like a razor blade I don't like to use razor blades at all.
Okay.
The ones that have the little bent over thing, I can't stand those. If I use a blade, it's always going to be a utility knife blade,
Okay.
because it comes in at that angle so that if I need to dig in and get stuff out here with that, I have got a nice point. But I don't like to do that because it creates more work for me later, because unless those are super sharp and brand new, your edge is going to be jagged in places and it's going to end up leaving tooling marks on the fretboard, and that you have to come back and sand later. But typically for all of that, like that heavy DNA stuff, I'll use naphtha, and I will sometimes just like douse it in naphtha and just let it sit for a minute. That way, as I come back successfully, or over a period of time, then it eventually just wipes away.
You know what works great? Scrubbing Bubbles bathroom spray.
Yeah, buddy, absolutely.
The foaming stuff.
For those of you that don't know, this is James Gay. James was the head of the custom shop at G&L. He is now with the Carter Repair Department. Also worked at MI. Yeah, we're everywhere. What else you have? You've been taking notes. I know you got to have a question or two.
Okay, so quarter turns. We take the tension off the strings, and then you
No, leave the tension on.
leave the tension on.
Yeah, because you're going to want to know. That's a big, thank you for saying that. For the truss rod, full tension.
Full tension.
The only time I will take, unless I'm changing strings, that I will take the strings slack to make an adjustment is on a Floyd. The reason for that is because the Floyd, if it's floating, meaning that you'll be able to pull back on it, you're dealing with a matching tension of strings versus springs. The string tension has to be equal to the spring tension that's happening in the cavity behind. So if I try to make an adjustment at full tension, that knife edge that's pivoting on that post, I can cut into the post or dull the knife edge, and then it may not return to zero. So if I slack the strings, then I relieve tension, then I can make my adjustment and then go back up.
Okay.
Now, obviously with a heel adjustment, you can't leave string tension on, right? But, because you have to take the strings down and then take the neck off and make your adjustment and put it back together and then check. But if, say, it's a head adjustment, or even my favorite is the spoke wheel, like at the end of the neck. Have you seen those? We have some. Do we have one of those here?
That sharp bell, that's really been working on.
No, because that's a classic one. Does it have one?
Yeah, I think so.
It does. Dig. Awesome. So this is my favorite style truss rod right here. because if I wanted to take the pick guard off, there's usually a 4 millimeter Allen here, but if you can just take whatever little rod will sit in that hole, you can truly adjust your truss rod between the first chorus and the second verse on a gig, because that will get you about a quarter turn. So those are, as you make those adjustments, if I've got full tuned, full tension, and I put my capo here and I've got my straight edge, right? I want to see that feedback immediately, because right now I've got all of the right tension of this is how hard the strings are going to pull on the neck. So I either tighten or loosen and then measure. Always do it in playing position, not like on a neck rest, because if it's on a neck rest, gravity will push down and it can give you a false reading. So this is my favorite guitar in the store.
So with that, what I was told at the beginning was you have to let the neck kind of adjust and match that new change. So let the rhythm kind of follow it. If quarter turn is not enough for you to go further, it's not going to hurt it. It can keep going.
No, and it doesn't need to adjust. You just made a turn.
I took way longer to deal with my.
No, it's okay. No, man, it's better to be cautious. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But that's part of that, that hoogie, right? That's built into this. Like I know guys that whenever they change strings, they won't take the D and G strings off because they don't want to take all the tension off. They're just like, oh my God, what'll happen if I take all the tension off? I was like, you won't have strings on your guitar. That's what'll happen. And then when you put them back on, well, congratulations, you'll have strings on again. Okay. It's not a big deal. It's like the whole word tone wood. I despise that. It's wood. It's the wood that we use to make this. Ta-da. What else you got?
On a related note, I've heard when you make that truss rod adjustment, some people suggest kind of massage the neck, try and. Do you find that has any value?
Yes and no. I will only do like a neck flex like that. I'll do a neck flex if I'm trying to seat it into something. Like if I just put the neck on the guitar, then I might give it a little bit of a flex. Where I really do it is if I'm putting it on the pluck machine. Whenever it's in the cradle, I will flex the neck just to make sure that, okay, everything's sitting right where it should. Cool, now this thing can measure it. But from a truss rod adjustment, no. If there's a huge back bow in it and it doesn't have a dual action truss rod, you might try loosening and giving it a bit of a flex if it will let go a little bit more, which it can. Or a huge back bow with a dual action, that still might help. But for the most part, no, you don't have to worry about that. Same thing with acoustic guitars. You can take all the strings off the acoustic guitar too. It's not going to hurt anybody.
So I was actually trying to do a repair on one of my, his action was at 12 above, which was really high.
That's big. That's great if it's a slide or a dobro.
I started working on it, and then I realized the neck, maybe 6 inches from the end of the headstock, it would bow there, but it wouldn't bow. It was very straight the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Is that something that happened? My worry is it's broken.
Well, you're not far off. That's what I had talked about before with doing a setup. A setup is not only to get the guitar to a point where you can play it, but it's a great diagnostic tool, and it will show you where problems lie. What you found is that's probably a construction issue. Back to whenever I made a jab at this company earlier. This problem had nothing to do with the guy that, well, a little bit, not the guy that put it together, but early on, the guy that was doing the prep for the lumber, but there's also a program problem here. So right there, the nut is hitting in a bind because there's not enough material removed there. So over time, that can get bound and those will snap off. I have a big stack of them that have a piece of tape on them that says BTR for broken truss rod. Now, the one that you're talking about, that neck it may not be a construction issue, but the wood itself could have decided, nope, I'm not moving. They can twist over time. I have one that I made for a country artist that I have in my shop right now, that the neck is truly just, if you look down it this way, the headstock is like twisted so bad. So I'm just gonna have to remake that neck. So yeah, that may be a problem.
Yeah, no twisting on it. There was none there, but it was that very end. So I thought maybe, and you could only adjust the truss rod from the body. So you couldn't do anything from the top.
Well,
maybe it was a little short.
when you see the truss rod as well, like if it's loaded down here, so your nut's here, the end of the truss rod is going to be here. Where you're getting the most amount of adjustment is going to be here. So that might not be moving, or this is moved all it's gonna. So yeah, there's a.
I gave it back to him and told him go to a professional because
Or yeah.
I was afraid.
What kind of guitar was it?
It's an off-brand. I have it written down, but I can't
Okay.
remember what.
Not like a high-end instrument or anything like
No,
that.
it was his first guitar.
Oh, okay.
Like first acoustic guitar.
Acoustic guitar. Okay.
Acoustic guitar.
Yeah. All right.
If you give me 5 minutes, the name will pop up. But
Got it. Anyone else?
But it might be a different scope. Get a guy who, well, we got a married couple who had a brother who passed away.
Uh-huh.
Fender P bass, or it says it's a Fender P bass. I can't track the serial number. The neck pocket on the body and the neck itself doesn't match.
You mean size-wise? So he's saying like with a Fender, a P bass. How old is the guitar?
She seems to think it's like late 60s. Or
Okay.
late 70s.
So late 60s Fender, and the neck pocket is probably bigger than it needs to be, and the neck is smaller, so there's gaps around that. Okay. There's a bunch of reasons why that happens. There's swelling, there's shrinkage, there's also problems with the templates. Tolerances like spec that like all the gear page dudes like to talk about for Fender in the 1960s was more of a suggestion. It's like, hey, this is what we're shooting for. So if those templates for the pin routers were starting to wear out, well, then it's going to cut something larger than or smaller than it needs to. You'll see, I've seen plenty of old Fenders where I could put a 1mm guitar pick or like a Fender Extra Heavy and hold it there. Like, if I need that later, that's where I'll get it. Yeah, it could happen. When the flood happened here in Nashville, my storage locker was in sound check. And like I was touring then, so my entire touring and session rig was in there. And yeah, I saw stuff. I had a custom shop Strat that swelled, the ends of the fretboard swelled out about 1/8 of an inch past the fret. And we all thought, oh my gosh, this is done. No. Just give it a few weeks. Once all that water got left, everything shrank back. I still have that guitar. My 77 Les Paul Standard turned into a kit. It just fell apart. My 61 Les Paul that was sitting right beside it looked like it needed strings. It's really weird. Colton cases, they say that they are waterproof. They are. Once the water gets in, it will not get out. My 57 Martin is still in pieces. I used to use it as a demonstration to show students how to put cleats in a guitar top because that had a bunch of cleats in it. And it was easy to just hold it up and go, see, it's supposed to look like this. Yeah, but with that though, there's not really much you can do. Just make sure that the screws are tight in there and that the neck doesn't move around. You don't need to. Yeah. Yeah, don't bounce around too much. Anything else? Nothing? Everyone has a gig to go to? Right on. Yes, sir.
Just one 3-in-1, I kind of like that idea, but,
Fender Custom Shop is where I got that,
okay.
like 30 years ago.
I know there's some concern, certain oils can be like polymerizing and stuff. Is there any products you would say avoid because they might?
So he's asking like the best fretboard conditioner. I would stay away from, I mean, obviously like don't use like Pledge or something like that, which I've seen. But just about any like guitar polish maker is going to make a decent fretboard conditioner. And those are all absolutely cool to stick with. I didn't even realize they still made finger ease until like at a gig last week. He's like, you need this? I was like, no. No. But yeah, any company makes a really decent fretboard conditioner. I've always just liked 3-in-1 oil because I always had it. It made the most sense for me. Lemon oil is also great. Mineral oil is another one because you can get that stuff in like, gallon containers for next to nothing, and it'll last you forever. What else?
So the first thing you do is you adjust the truss rod before doing any of your other setup. So how important, like height from the strings over the fretboard? How important? Do you have like a ratio of like, oh, it needs to be a 9 above the 12th fret, and then by the time you're down to the nut, it needs to be like a 5?
So that takes us into, so he's asking, if I'm going to do the truss rod adjustment, am I measuring string height before I do that to make sure that I'm getting everything correct? So when you do a setup, and this is what I talked about in the last one, there are 4 kind of 5 steps. So what they are, if it's a guitar that doesn't have a vibrato, then truss rod, and you're only dealing with that low E string straight edge thing that I talked about, and you can use a feeler gauge or dial indicating mechanism that you can also get from several luthier tools supplies. The next thing you'll do will be string height. That's where you're going to want to measure. Some people will do it at the final fret. Some people will do it at 17. I will do it at 12 because 12 it just makes the most sense for me. And you're measuring from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string. Typically what you'll see is 4 64ths, graduating up to 6 64ths on the low E string. And that's just like a general run-of-the-mill kind of spec. I like it lower. I'll go 4 64ths all the way across. So truss rod, string height. The next thing is nut height. That's where you're going to want to measure how high does the string sit off of the first fret. That's based on the depth of the nut slot. So you can, again, measure that using feeler gauges. Fender's spec is 18 thousandths from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string. Novo does 10 thousandths high E, 13 B, 14, 15, 10, 13, 15, 16, 17, graduating upwards.
Sorry, say that one again.
So 10 thousandth at the first fret, 13 at the second string, 15, 16, 17. And those are in thousands, 0.010. Now, and that's again up to your playing style.
And you're measuring the nut from the bottom of the nut to where?
No, I'm not measuring the nut at all.
Oh, this is the string.
Yes.
itself.
So if I need to drop, if that's say that high E string needs to be at 10 thou, but it's sitting at 16, now I'll take the string out of the nut slot and using nut files, which I don't have up here right now, you can get gauged nut files that will be 10 thou, 13 thou, 17 thou. I'll make a few swipes to remove material out of the nut, put the string back in, measure again. Always in tune, in playing position. Finally is intonation. And intonation is a matter of like moving the saddles forward or backward to make sure that you have you're creating a true octave of the string at the 12th fret.
Would you change your saddle height before you?
That's string height. That's the second step.
Oh, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then what's that fifth step?
The fifth step is actually the second step if it's a vibrato. You want to make sure that the base plate of the vibrato is set where you want it. So if it needs to float, Fender's spec for a Strat bridge is that the back of the bridge plate needs to be 332 off of the face of the body. If it's a Floyd, you're going to want that base plate to be parallel with the face of the body. So that's going to basically mean you're going to be doing spring tensioning. So once you get the guitar in tune, well, the base plate may be rocked way, way up, tighten the springs, and then keep going back and forth, because you will, until it finds its equilibrium, its matching strings versus springs tension, until you get that thing parallel. Then move on to string height, nut height, and intonation.
Okay.
What else you got? So very soon, we will be doing, I told you, with Mighty Might, we'll be making a lot of stuff here in Laverne, bodies, necks. We're one of only a few companies to have a Fender license. So when I make a Strat body, it'll be a Fender. We will be able to offer custom finishes like you see over here, which we're already doing, both in clean, that is a polyester top coat, as well as aged relic. I'm calling it Mighty B Up. So those are all in nitrocellulose lacquer. Pickups, there's a lot of cool stuff coming. So if you guys look at what's happened historically with Mighty Might, like in the 70s, there was the clear bobbin pickup. I'm developing prototypes for those right now. Yes, our friend Steve at Carter, also a former MI instructor, gave me a set of vintage Mighty Might clear bobbin humbuckers just recently to study. I was pretty jazzed about that. So keep an eye out on that. Watch mightymight.com, because we have a revolving door of stuff up there all the time. Same with in here, as well as Nashville guitar part, or I'm sorry, Franklin guitar parts on eBay. There's all kinds of cool stuff all up on there right now, like a bunch of G&L stuff. So go look at that. Go buy all of it. It's in my way right now. Thank you guys for being here.